Our predictions for the 2024 Azerbaijan Grand Prix. Let's jump right into our predictions. Brandon, who are you predicting for podium pusher of the weekend?
My podium pusher of the weekend, I'm going to go with Fernando Alonso. Like you just mentioned, Adrian Newey is likely to be announced soon. All of the rumors are pointing to him signing with Aston Martin, and Lawrence Stroll emptying all of his pockets into Adrian Newey's. Um, so I think I think that'll be announced soon. I think if Fernando knows anything about that, he's going to be feeling great about the car next year and probably feeling better about the car this year a little bit. It's a track in a new spot in the calendar, so that always provides some excitement. And Fernando did pretty well last year. Both Aston Martins did actually. So I think he'll have a great weekend, and I'm going with him for my podium pusher of the weekend.
I've gone with Charles Leclerc as my podium pusher of the weekend. Obviously, coming off of Monza with maybe as much momentum as it's possible for a single driver to have. And as I talked about in our last podcast, we've got a lot of tracks coming up that Charles Leclerc is very, very good at. Baku is one of those tracks. I just listed him off as having the previous three pole positions there. Didn't even mention that there's a fourth one in there because he technically got sprint pole last year as well. So Charles Leclerc is very good at Baku, and he's always done it with not the best car, and clearly Ferrari doesn't have the best car. Not saying that at all, but they're up there. I think they were clearly the second fastest car in Monza. Fred Vasseur said that he expects Ferrari to be competing for wins at most tracks for the rest of the year. I would assume that Baku is going to be one of those tracks. The characteristics of the track suit the Ferrari. So I think Charles Leclerc is set up to have a great weekend in Baku. Who is your back marker prediction for this weekend?
My back marker prediction, and this is purely just vibes, but I'm going to go with Alex Albon. He had a good weekend in Monza, but I don't know. I just don't think the Williams is at the point where they can be consistent enough to perform well. Baku obviously has some long straights, but it does have some pretty slow corners as well. So I don't think the Williams car is versatile enough to be able to perform that well at Baku. I'm going with Alex Albon, unfortunately. I'd love for him to have a great weekend. Love for him to win the race, get a podium, whatever. But I don't think it's going to happen.
I've gone for Esteban Ocon as back marker of the weekend. This is a straight vibes pick as well. I have no idea why I picked him. I just thought of Baku, and I thought of that one time last year or 2 years ago where he came into the pit lane on the last lap to make his required pit stop, and the photographers came out and they almost hit him, but he pulled it off and made his pit stop and then still didn't really score any points. It was kind of a weird situation. In my mind, the Alpine is way worse than when that happened. And if you couldn't even pull off that weird, wild strategy to score points, no shot he's doing it this weekend. So I'm going to go with Esteban Ocon as my back marker of the weekend. Who do you think is going to get pole position this time out in Baku?
It was really hard for me to pick against Charles Leclerc, but because he's got three previous poles here and a sprint pole here, I wanted to pick someone other than him. So I'm going with Oscar Piastri. Oscar, I think, has been due for a pole position for quite some time, and I think this weekend might be the weekend that he pulls it off. I'm also kind of counting on McLaren to, I don't know, continue their weird strategy that's going on, this weird papaya rules, no team orders, sometimes team orders situation that is playing out there. And I think something weird in terms of papaya rules or whatever happens in qualifying, then I think maybe Oscar could definitely be on pole.
I could not pick against Charles Leclerc, and that's why I've gone for Charles Leclerc on pole position. It's really hard for me to predict against Charles Leclerc back here. He just has an incredible track record here. He is probably the best qualifier on the grid. Just the one lap pace that he can extract out of that Ferrari when it is not a good car is really impressive, especially his 2021 pole in that Ferrari. I mean, that car was nowhere, and he whipped out that pole at Baku. So if he can do that with a Ferrari that's that far down the grid, who knows what he can do with a Ferrari that's the second fastest car on the grid. And so in my mind, that is the no-brainer pick for pole position. Who do you think is going to get third place this time out in Baku?
Third place, I've gone with Lando Norris. I don't know. The whole McLaren situation is just strange, and I think Lando has the car to finish on the podium. I think McLaren's definitely going to be on the podium. I'm predicting a double podium for them, but I think Lando is going to finish in P3. So
Yeah, they certainly should have the car to finish on the podium because in all likelihood they will be the best car on the grid once again. That's why I've gone for Oscar Piastri in third place. You put him on pole, and I think you're right. I'm sure he'll have pace this weekend. I think especially if that McLaren is the fastest car on the grid, I have no reason to assume that they won't finish on the podium. And so Oscar Piastri seems like a clear choice to me. Who have you got in second place?
I'm going with Oscar Piastri in second place. Lando in third, Oscar in second. Um, I think that especially if Lando gets pole, Oscar definitely will probably finish the race ahead of him. That just seems to be the theme. So if Lando outqualifies Oscar, Oscar will out race Lando. But yeah, I think, I predicted him to be on the pole, a McLaren double podium if they're the fastest car on the grid, which there's no reason to believe that they won't be. Is definitely in the cards. I've gone with Oscar in second place.
We've gone for McLaren 2-3. That's why I've put Lando Norris in second place. After how much they got absolutely bullied after Monza, in my mind, there's no way that they don't bring team orders to Baku. And so I don't care how the race is going to plan out. In my mind, Lando Norris finishes this race in front of Oscar Piastri, whether that's team orders through preferred strategy, team orders through physically Oscar letting Lando by. But I think there's no way Lando Norris finishes behind Oscar Piastri in this race. Who do you think is going to win the Azerbaijan Grand Prix?
I've gone with Charles Leclerc for winning the Grand Prix. I don't know, after seeing him win in Monza, getting that Ferrari home win in the environment there, I think he's just going to be riding on cloud nine into the weekend and take it all the way to the win. So yeah, I've gone with Charles.
I agree. We've said it all. There's nothing else to say. Charles is great at Baku. He's got momentum. Ferrari are looking to be back at the front of the field after their upgrades. It just makes sense to have a Charles Leclerc win this weekend. What are your two bold predictions for the Azerbaijan Grand Prix?
My two bold predictions, gone with Max Verstappen finishing outside of the top five in the race. The Red Bull, we haven't talked about them much in this episode, but it really seems like Red Bull is off the pace. They've truly fallen off, and I just don't think they're going to really be in contention from the beginning. I know Sergio's won here twice, Max has won here before, but those cars were very different than the car they have now. So I've gone with Max Verstappen finishing outside of the top five in the race. And then my second bold prediction is both Aston Martins into Q3. This happened last year, and they both scored points in the race and in the sprint that was held at Baku last year. So I think, I know we talked about how different the Aston Martin was at that point in the season than it is now, but I think they'll have a great weekend. I think Lance wants to make his dad proud. So I think it's going to happen. I think it's going to happen.
Yeah, Lance has got to prove that he's ready to be the World Drivers Champion in 2026 with Adrian Newey working on that car. My first bold prediction is that Sergio Perez does not reach Q3. Doesn't seem super bold based on how that Red Bull is performing right now and Sergio Perez's track record this year. But he's actually on a good run of form of reaching Q3. It's been a few races since he has not reached the third session in qualifying. So this weekend, I think we're going to see some vintage Sergio Perez, and he will not reach Q3. My second bold prediction is that at least one Haas driver will score points. I'm learning from your mistakes last weekend where you just said one team in the bottom five would score points. So I went ahead and put that at least in there. So I'm going to say at least one Haas driver scores points. Ollie Behrman is in the car this weekend for Kevin Magnussen, and Ollie Behrman drove incredible for Ferrari the first time he was filling in this year. Obviously, very different car, very different track. They are both street circuits, but Saudi is very different from Baku in a lot of ways. And so I'm expecting Ollie Behrman to have a fairly good weekend and wouldn't be super surprised if he scored points. But I'm definitely banking on Nico Hulkenberg for this prediction. The fans... At Rafi RP says neither Red Bull reaches Q3, which would be quite the shock if Max Verstappen was not in Q3. At Raza Cabero 6234 says a battle at the front of the field for position. I'm going to qualify this by like a pass for the lead that doesn't happen on lap one. If that happens, we can say this prediction is correct. And then at Ferrite Ball D, it says Yuki Tsunoda has his best result of the season, which would have to be a P6. And I really don't see that happening with the way the top four teams have pretty elevated themselves right now. But I think that's a great round of predictions from the fans.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, I think that Yuki finishing in P6 or better, that would be insane. That's a really bold prediction. And if we get to see some passes for the lead at some point in the race, that'd be awesome too. So we have a lot to, play for here in terms of predictions from both us and the fans. And I think all of them could come true.
They certainly could. As always, we appreciate all of you guys sharing your predictions with us to share in this podcast. You can find those posts on all of our social media platforms before the race weekend and can share your predictions with us. That is all we have got when it comes to predicting the Azerbaijan Grand Prix. Brandon, what are your parting podium thoughts before we leave these lovely people?
I'm excited for the weekend. I think it's going to be a great race. I think there's a lot of excitement to be had at Baku. Like you said, it was kind of cooled down in terms of action the last couple of years, but we've had a lot of really good races in 2024, and I expect that to continue here at Baku. So maybe we'll get some cars on the wall and some rain and, some crashes at the castle section of the track. That'd be pretty cool. Some blown tires, Max did a couple years ago. So I mean, I think there's going to be a lot of good stuff that happens this weekend, so I'm excited.
Hopefully, no blown tires as dramatic as Max's for the sake of driver safety. We actually haven't had a safety car in quite a few races now. I would not be surprised if that streak was broken at Baku. We've had great races in 2024, great races around this circuit. Put those two things together, I think we're on for an incredible weekend. That is all we've got. As always, thank you so much for listening to another episode of the Podium Pushers podcast. Be sure to like, subscribe, leave a comment and a review wherever you are watching or listening. We appreciate it very much. You can find us on Instagram, Twitter, TikTok, Facebook even. All of the places you take in content online, we're there and would be happy to share the 2024 Formula One season with you. Thank you so much for listening. We will see you in the next one.
See ya.